want to thank everybody for coming out. We're going to call this meeting to order, and we would like to have our prayer and pledge of allegiance. Any councilman want to volunteer for that? Okay, Councilman Young.
Father, as always, we just thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. Thank you for the opportunity to gather and do what's best for our community, Father. We pray that you guide us and lead us to the right decisions, the ones that are best for all of us tonight. And we just pray that we do things that glorify you. We pray this all in Jesus.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We're going to go down to agenda item number 2, which is for consideration to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Bullock County and other municipalities regarding the 2019 supplies and distribution of the 2019 supplies funds. Is there, open that up for discussion from the council. So move. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So let us discuss.
So before you, you have a copy of the intergovernmental agreement that we worked with the county. You'll note in there that it talks about our total, the city's total now is $15,143,400. That's the total that we worked on with the project. And we gave you 2 project lists, and at the top you notice one's dated 7/24 of 18, one's dated 7/25 of 18. Probably the biggest difference is under the Parks and Green Space, where the one dated 7/24 has $700,000, the one that's dated 7/25 has $1,100,000. That's on the project list. I want to thank Jeff, Tom, and Ted, and Robert, and Rob, and Mike, that we spent a lot of time with them talking about the radios, talking about the infrastructure, and also King. King spent a lot of hours with Jeff coming up with the language where for the radios, the city won't be purchasing the radios through the issuance of the debt. We'll still be eligible to purchase the radios after the negotiations, which will happen here at the end of July and first part of August. And Jeff or King, whenever I get off here with how we're putting that up, you guys are more than happy to join in, that the county will reimburse us our 42% of that because we're taking it off the top, but we'll get our money back that way. There's also, and that's on the radios. On the infrastructure, I'm looking for the page. Where's that?
That's going to be on. That's going to be on page 13, subset 6C. About halfway down that paragraph.
Where to start out, the city and the county are the ones that are actually purchasing the infrastructure and will be paying for the infrastructure. But if you see in 6Cs, the parties anticipate that there may be other potential users of the radio system, including but not necessarily limited to Georgia Southern, Bullock County Board of Education, and Technical College, and East Georgia College, and there might be some others that we don't know of. But any capital recovery fees paid by any entity that enters into a user agreement shall be dispersed among the county and municipalities in the same percentages as those set forth in 684 of this agreement. Which basically means that we're going to put up the upfront money. As those other entities want to get onto the system, there will be a calculation which will say they owe a certain amount of money, and when they pay that in, we will receive, what is it, the 42 or the 43% of that total? 42.5 or?
Yeah, 42.3.
42.3. So then our percentage of the actual cost that we're paying will be reduced as those other entities come on. So we think that we've looked at not only the purchase of the radios, but also to the infrastructure of ways that we can reduce some of our costs and get some additional money as those agreements come in. We just didn't have enough time. I don't think Tom had enough time to get into those agreements with those other entities and get it on the SPOS. So this was the best option that I think we came up with, and Jeff and King came up with the language that we felt comfortable with that. Those are probably the biggest things for us. But coming up with our project list that will be a part of the intergovernmental agreement, that's something that we need to do tonight, so we can meet the timelines that the county has as far as getting it onto the ballot. Because the election board will meet on August the 1st, to get this stuff moving, so we can go. So we really need to nail those costs down tonight.
Thank you, Randy. Is there any further discussion by council?
So will the goal be to get the Board of Education, Georgia Southern, whoever else may participate, to reimburse us through purchases of radios? Or will they be paying for part of the infrastructure as well?
They'll be paying for part of the infrastructure, and the radios, they will be purchasing those on their own. The same way we will be purchasing those on our own. So those are, we've separated those out, and so when they want to come on, it'll be the infrastructure. And Ted thinks that perhaps we can get that number down from where we are now with the bid that came forward, and so that number may actually come down by itself, and then the amount that the city and county will actually end up owing will actually be less, because we'll have those others helping to pay for some of those costs as well. But we do need to figure out what our project is, one way or the other.
Is there any further discussion by council?
Yeah, we need to discuss the list, don't we? What's the difference between them? I'm sorry.
The biggest one, when you look at, and Robert, be sure to join anytime you want to. We look at the 724 and the 725. The biggest difference is when you look at the 725 in the parks, green space, trails, capital outlay project, you'll notice that has a number of 1.1 million, and when you look at the 724, it has 700,000.
The 724 is exactly what we had for us last time, correct?
It's actually slightly different, but that's only because the number that we got from the county
Totals
increased a little more, so we spread out the dollars.
amongst the same.
Yes, there you go.
Thank you, Rob.
Any further discussion?
I'd like to ask Chief, question or two, Police Chief. Tell me about our vehicles. Just how bad a shape are they? And let me ask you this: let's see what we got down here. $2 million for police vehicles. How many would that give us?
Well, that was, I have to think about that for a minute, because we kind of copied it 2 or 3 different times. We initially had about $3.5 million over 7 years in there. We felt like that was going to get the fleet very healthy. Then because we started doing revisions, we went down to about 1.7 million, something like that. Spur of the time, I think now it's $2 million or something. And so I can tell you that those cars are costing us about $40,000 a piece for patrol cars, about $30,000 for the car, and about $10,000 to $12,000 to outfit them with cage and emergency lights and those kind of things. We are still running some cars that have huge hours on them and a couple 100,000 miles. And we tried to surplus some of those. As you remember, we came through and came to give you. We only actually were able to physically get rid of one of those cars so far, because we just have to have some old cars. As hiring ramps up, we're putting older and older cars back into service. We feel like over the period of this SPLOST, this amount of money will make the fleet much healthier than it is now. We'll be able to get rid of a lot of cars that are just frankly costing us money to keep on the road. The good news is that, and this is largely through the work of Deputy Chief Brian, we're going with this police interceptor that has a 7-year warranty on it. We've got about 14 of those in service right now, and that's going to drive our maintenance costs way down, just because we'll be able to keep them in service for that length of time without a bunch of maintenance costs.
You said over 7 years, get the fleet in a lot better shape.
Yes, sir.
Is that the plan to get rid of the Chargers and move over to the?
Yes, sir, absolutely it is. All
All
of the last 2 years worth of car purchases and those that we plan to make in this next fiscal year are gonna all be, all the interceptors. Yes, sir, we're just trying to get rid of all of those charges, but just because we can, we still have some Crown Vics in service.
I know.
At least on the lot. So ultimately, we'd like to get rid of all the cars that have that white and blue paint scheme and go all with the black and silver, but you can kind of see the age of those cars. I think about the last 4 years have been black and gray, and so anything that's white is older than that, so that's
How do you feel about going from about $250,000? I mean, the last thing I want is someone to be driving.
Sure. I feel really good about it. I think that this is a good answer spread out citywide, and we have to always acknowledge that although we're trying to make the police fleet healthy, there's a fire fleet, there's trucks that they need for public services as well. And so I think this is it's not a wish list for us. This is a good compromise number, working with the other departments to make sure that all those fleets stay healthy. I think, there's always bad luck, right? We could wrap a brand new car around a pole by accident and then we're money behind as we're trying to catch up with insurance repayments and those things. But one thing that has helped us keep the fleet alive is our lack of staffing, which is sort of a lose-lose situation. But as staffing is ramping up and you see these old cars getting back in service, our maintenance costs are going to go up. And so it really is just a question of not trying to fix it tomorrow because we can't afford it. But over that period of this loss, being able to get the fleet healthy again, I think is within reach.
Okay. With the $2 million?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Very good, Chief. I mean, I know the BOE is still working out their situation, and we don't know if it's going to be county sheriffs or Statesboro police officers or some kind of combination. Do you anticipate if we have to put officers in a school that they're going to need vehicles as well?
Yes, sir, Mayor and Council, just so you know, the discussions that I've had with the superintendent, we're going to put another officer at Statesboro High School starting when school starts back this year. That our increased staffing ability has allowed us to free another officer up. And I think that's only, the right answer is to have at least 2 officers at Statesboro High School, just based on student population. The elementary schools, we're not going to put an officer in right now, but I have talked to the superintendent about asking them to purchase the vehicles for those 2 SROs. One, in the next fiscal year, because obviously they had already closed the budget prior to that decision, and then another one about 2.5 years later. And then if we can keep a new car for 2 new officers and rotate them out about every 5 to 7 years after that, I think that then again will help our fleet because those cars that are dedicated to the high school are being paid for by the school district. They were very amenable to that plan. We obviously don't have a contract to guarantee that, but I feel like the school district wants to do that and wants to be on board with that.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks for the good news, Chief. Chief Woods. Any further discussion on that?
Yeah, I have a question for Chief Grant.
Yes, sir.
Could you just tell us about the plans for Fire Station 3?
Sure. So Fire Station 3 has been a project that was actually in the 07 SPLOST. It's been a project that we've had on the books for quite some time. And the reason that it has stayed on the books for such a long period of time is that we are have not reached a point where we feel comfortable with the placement. And there's several factors that go into that, such as the population growth and where, Georgia Southern, how they're stretching out. And then, obviously, fire districts, that one of the main topics of conversation with Bullock County, talking about the fire agreement, has been, long-term so that we can make capital investments, a fire station being one of those. So right now, over the last 2 years, we have felt a lot more comfortable that the area that's probably going to need to be located is going to be in the general vicinity of 301 South and the bypass, generally, simply because of those fairly large apartment complexes that have gone, and then looking at response times over the last couple of years, they are creeping up just with traffic and you know, all the different stuff that's coming in and slowing the response down that west side. So we feel like that's, again, when I say general area, it could be, you know, Pulaski Country Club, just somewhere in that area to help with the response. But again, I don't feel comfortable making any kind of recommendations or bringing anything forward until we have some of these other questions answered.
Oh, sure, I was just looking for some general information there. I mean, we also know that there's quite a bit of growth going on between, I guess, the west or east area of town, you know, as from the Lowe's out towards Brooklyn.
Right.
That whole area is growing. Quanah Road, there's a new hospital, there's a new hotel going up. There's all that development around Aspen Heights. I realize there's a station on there on Fair Road, but do you anticipate, when do you see a fourth station in the future?
Well, I either see one or two things, and again, I would ask that just be taken in the context that's intended, which is, this is just broad opinion, shotgun kind of thoughts, but we have been looking at it for quite some time, and there's a couple of different options that we have explored, and one is relocating Station 2. You know, just taking that station and relocating it, selling the property and doing something closer to 80 East in the bypass. With the addition of Station 3 at the 301 area, we feel like that gives us a good distribution over the city. But then we have also looked at, you know, Station 3 would be a true substation, which would basically be a bay with a crew of 3 or 4, 20, you know, on the same shifts. So it would not be as elaborate of a layout as when we constructed Station 2 or renovated Station 1 for that matter. So we have looked at a couple of those options. Again, I think it's important for us to have a little bit more of a firm idea of you know, kind of what our response area is going to look like for this foreseeable future. And you know, as I said a couple of times before, I feel very optimistic working with the county on this agreement. We did a 12-month extension of the current contract. I think we all have come to some common goals that we all want to see, and I feel like we're going to be able to achieve that. And based on that, I feel like we can have a better idea of future station needs.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Is there a recommendation?
I guess I just interject this, we don't have to adopt 724 or 725, you can make adjustments within any of those, so we just have these that you can start discussing about. If you like one or the other, that's fine too. If you don't, we can change everything.
Well, and loosely speaking, Randy, just if it's within the Statesboro Fire Department, that money can shift from project to project within. So we're just looking at the bold number, basically. So
Yeah, when you look at the
we're
back,
looking at 724, for example. The fire department is the subtotal for them is what, 3,375,000. So then they can shift those numbers around as needed. The police department is at what?
yeah, if you look at the
2.7.
If you look at the back of the IGA, it actually has the totals and everything, and it has those broad categories that will actually go on the ballot. So, and it has it not for just for us, it has it for the other cities in the county. And so when these were to let you know what we're thinking about doing. So it comes within those broad categories. We have that.
And should we get reimbursed where does that money go? It doesn't go, certainly would go back into the general fund, would it?
Goes,
I don't think so.
goes, that if there's enough, we'll have to amend the IGA, and it basically says that the city and county and municipalities will agree of how that gets spread out again. And that's in section, of how that money will be,
Reimbursement of the radio system?
Right.
yeah.
Oh, that's going to be in, that's going to be on page 30. That's in section 60 as well. The any capital recovery fees paid by another entity will be dispersed among county and municipalities in the same percentages and shall be used by the county and municipalities for their respective projects identified in Exhibit A.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is, let's just say that's a significant number, $500,000, right? If we don't have a project assigned to that $500,000, where does it go?
An amended IGA. A revised IGA to reflect that money is not there.
AKA the IGA, you mean SPOT? Because I was under the impression that if the voters vote on this, and we can't really deviate from this. So where would that $500,000 go when we get it?
It can go into, and Jeff will go to you, I believe it can go into one of those broad categories because we'll amend it. We'll come back to you and say we have $480,000.
To my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that any money, any funds that's amended, we can take those and put those into any other project areas that's already been previously identified. Is that correct?
I would agree with that. Yeah, I don't think you can add a new project that's not on your ballot.
Yeah, exactly. It has to go into
You can
areas
increase
the voters have agreed
the
to do it.
estimated cost of the projects that are on
Yeah.
For example,
Was it? Go ahead.
for example, we could buy more police cars.
there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
So increase the public safety.
Yeah.
So we still have that ability within those broad categories to decide if we're going to put it in police, or we're going to put it in fire, or we're going to put it in wherever.
Any further questions or comments? Okay. Is there a recommendation?
Make a motion to approve
Okay.
consideration of the, $725.
Okay. Is there a second? Or is there any further discussion before we get a second? Okay, being that there's no further discussion, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. 725 is passed. We will move on to the next agenda item. Consideration of a motion to award emergency purchase of 2 clarified drive units to Southern Water Technologies in the amount of $72,000.
Just a second. So we approved the project list, now we need to have adoption of the actual IGA.
Is there a motion to adopt the IGA?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, the idea has been adopted. I want to commend, before I go into this, I want to commend this council. I want to commend those over at the county, the staff and so forth that's been working diligently on this. Statesboro, this has not been an easy process. And they have really, really worked their behinds off to get this to happen. And we've had more than one tough conversation to get us to where we are right now. But everybody stayed professional. And I think that you guys definitely need a feather in your hat for everything that you guys have done to push our city forward. And I do want to commend, not just our staff, but the staff of the county as well. Because they've really, really been working extremely hard. So thank you guys for everything that you've done. We're going to move to agenda item 3. Come on, Steve, you know we're waiting on. Consideration of a motion to award the emergency purchase of 2 clarified drive units for Southern Work Technologies in the amount of $72,984.
Steve Hotchkiss, Public Utilities. Yes, this is a replacement of gearbox drives for 2 clarifiers at the wastewater treatment plant. These clarifiers are long. If you've ever seen an aerial photo, they're large, round, circular tanks, have rotating arms. Those gearboxes drive those rotating arms. We have 2 clarifiers. One of them is down and has quit working. And we have a second one that's now making the same noise that the first one made when it broke. And we can survive with 1 down, we can't with 2. And that's the reason we're bringing this as an emergency, because it's a pretty substantial lead time, 10 to 14 weeks. So we need to get this order placed as soon as possible to get that in here, so that we can, hopefully this other one's going to limp along until we get this box in here and get them replaced. But this is for 2 new drives, and we'll put a new drive on each of the clarifiers. And I want to say to the staff at the treatment plant, these are old tanks, old equipment, and they did a lot of legwork and hunting up people and trying to find retrofit drives and fit these things. And I want to commend the staff out there for working really hard to get this pulled together. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Just a general question, Steve. What's the life of these clarifier drives?
Apparently about 22 years.
20 years.
Not a comment, right?
Yeah, the first one the one that's broke down has been repaired about 7 or 8 years ago, but it failed again. But in this process, we found out there's a lower gear that's going bad, and we think that's what forced the top gear to fail again. And that's the reason we're replacing the whole unit, upper and lower drive, because we're afraid if we put the new drive on, it's just going to fail again in a couple of years. And we have to go back to the original equipment. If we just replace the upper gear, we have to do original equipment. And an original equipment upper gearbox is $42,000. So we're replacing the whole upper and lowers with retrofits for about $37,000 each. So we're able to do this cheaper than even just replacing the uppers with original equipment. And the lead time is even longer on those. It takes 16 to 18 weeks to get those. So this we can get these faster too.
Thank you, Steve. Is there any discussion from the council in regards to this matter?
I'll just say, I hope those clarifiers never go down at the same time.
Yeah, no, right?
Yeah.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I would like to see if there's a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Thank you, Council.
And then we'll go down to number 4. We have a public hearing, first reading of ordinance 2018-06, or ordinance of the Statesboro Code of Ordinance amending Chapter 6 regarding Section 6-3 definitions and Section 6-9 and persons under the age of 21. Is there a motion to enter to open public hearing? Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. So, Frank, switch Frank. We don't have Frank here. Frank too? Frank? No?
We don't have our friend.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Is there anyone who wants to speak for the request? Come on.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Mike Vackworth. I am representing the Georgia Restaurant Association out of Savannah, and here at the request of Franklin Dismukes of Eagle Creek Brewery to speak on this particular issue. We have looked at the language very quickly, very briefly, rather, because we were actually apprised of this at around 2 o'clock this afternoon, and have done a quick quick scan on the language that is before you for first reading, and would like to ask that you hold on adopting this and give the restaurant community some time to work with your staff and legal department to fine-tune some of this language. We certainly understand that your goal is to try to control access for 18 to 21-year-olds in establishments that sell adult beverages. That is a commendable goal. That is something that we worked with the city of Savannah for about 4 years on, and adopting an alcoholic beverage ordinance and then refining and adopting a revision to the alcoholic beverage ordinance not more than 60 days ago. We see some similar language in the proposals that you have before you, but there are some inconsistencies, there's some confusing provisions, there's an incomplete provision that needs to be worked on to be fleshed out. And we think that we collectively have the expertise from being in the trenches with this issue for about 4 years to be able to assist significantly in moving this forward, not trying to stall it, but try to move it forward as rapidly as possible with the goal of having an ordinance that does 3 things. Number 1, it controls access of the 18 to 21-year-olds to establishments, not only restaurants, but bars as well, that sell alcoholic beverages, complies with Michael's law, and the third one is easily understandable by not only our restaurants, the bars, the community that's selling alcoholic beverages, but also the enforcement community, so that we don't have a situation where the restaurants don't understand what it means, the police department does not understand what it means, and there's a big gray area of enforcement which can lead to even bigger problems that you have now. So with that, I would ask that either it not be adopted on first reading tonight, or be adopted on first reading and allow us to work very closely with staff to bring a much more defined ordinance back to you sometime within the next 2 weeks to 30 days. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hey, don't go too far, because there may be a few questions. Is there anyone to speak against? No? All right. Is there a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Council, do you have any discussion?
First, I'd like to say thank you to Franklin. I cannot even tell you how long I have recommended that the restaurant owners, bar owners, whoever you want to consider, bring in an attorney of their own to address their concerns. It's not really Kane's responsibility to write laws that address specific businesses necessarily. And so, again, thank you, Franklin, for bringing someone in that and you said you worked on both Savannah and Athens? Is that right?
Well, worked on, sorry. I worked on the Savannah ordinance, both the version that was adopted 4 years ago and the latest version, which required multiple versions of language. I was also somewhat one of the architects of Michael's law and the provision that allows 18 to 21-year-olds to have access to bars as long as there is live entertainment and there is a cover charge collected at the door. So we have danced around this issue quite often. I will correct one thing. I am not an attorney, but I do help write the laws.
Any further discussion by council?
Well, the only other thing I was going to say was the reason I asked this to be brought up today was that I felt, and the reason I brought up the whole proposal in general, is I felt that the previous recommendations fell short of addressing all the issues facing the business owner. I mean, I felt it addressed some specific ones, but it did not address everything that had been discussed at those work sessions. And then secondly, we're not about to adopt this on a first reading. But it was also in order to get this on the agenda tonight, gives us the opportunity to do a second reading beginning of August at our first meeting. And hopefully, if you can help facilitate that, that would be a way for us to get the alcohol ordinance behind us before the university gets into session.
And we will commit to that, absolutely.
Well, we appreciate
So
your
you
help.
got enough time to do everything you need to do?
I will make that.
Okay. All right. Is there any further discussion?
I have to concur with what Councilman Bourne said. It's a great idea that bringing forth the refugees on hand. It's good to have come from a military background. That we all don't know everything. Have the awesome experts in the field. It's good to get more counsel than one. It's knowledge in numbers, and welcome your input.
Absolutely.
So could I just say something, because I'm looking at the calendar? My guess is by having it ready by the 7th, means that it has to be ready by the 1st, August 1st, which is pretty quick. So
Right.
maybe, So he will have basically a week to have something to us to have on the agenda for the meeting on the 7th, because that's when things need to be turned in, the August 1st or the. So that's what we're doing.
We can make that.
Well, you know, I mean, we've talked about wanting to make sure we're competing with Savannah, and we've even looked at the Savannah ordinances and, concerned about students going to Savannah, so. Well, an ordinance that in some way mirrors Savannah, but does the specific things that we need here in Statesboro would be great. And
Right.
It's nice to have an expert.
Right, and it's not like we have to do the entire ordinance, but we would check that for consistency throughout. But I get the sense of what it is that you are trying to do, and we've basically done the same thing with the city of Savannah. So I don't view that target a week from now. It is absolutely achievable, at least from our perspective. Now, the city attorney, he probably fainted a minute ago.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask a quick question right quick. Now, technically, we hadn't heard your ordinance.
Right.
So it wouldn't be a second reading, it would be a first reading.
Well, this is proposed, if as long as it's generally the same, it's just modified, we can modify between first and second reading, and then just like the SLOSS agreement, we can modify, we can make modifications even at the second reading. So it doesn't have to be exact on either reading.
I think in order to make the time schedule that is proposed, while I did ask that you not do it on first reading, in order to make that proposal, I think it would be judicious to go ahead and put it on first reading. There's no language that's attached to the first reading, and generally the purpose of going to a second reading is to give council the opportunity to craft that language and then bring it to you for the second reading. So I don't have a problem with that as a process. Do you?
Are you talking about doing the first reading on the 7th?
No, I'm talking about just go ahead and do the first reading now, and then when we come back on the 7th, then unless there are, and there can be minor modifications made on the 7th as well. So what we bring back to you is not necessarily what you have to adopt. You have the option then to make modest changes to that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a good idea. I just would rather have the document in front of me. I would like to read it and then make a decision on it. That's just me personally. Because I don't want to say we're doing a second reading, I hadn't read it. And I know I'm going on vacation tomorrow, so I'm not reading anything next week. So I would much rather be able to have, I'd rather get it in front of us and then let us read through it and then pass it. 'Cause I mean, it's not necessarily a crunch for time.
We're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
We can adopt it after school starts. I just thought everybody be a nice way to.
I mean, but I'm just one voice right now. So I mean, if you guys are comfortable with it, then go right ahead. I'm just saying that I would rather
have a second reading,
in August. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're moving in the right direction.
And that gives staff a chance to take a look at it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'd like you to yield Ken for any further thoughts you may have on what's been said.
I think that's a great idea. I'll be glad to work with him in the meantime. Hopefully we can present something on August 7th.
Yeah.
And whatever additions or concerns that mayor and council have, we can take those into consideration and revise it, hopefully for adoption on the 21st.
You're just happy not to have to write the next draft, aren't you?
I'm not, that's my job.
Okay, so that's good. I think we're moving in the right direction. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys coming over. Thank you, Franklin. Thank you, Phil. Is there any further discussion? Oh, okay, let's move on down to consideration of a motion to enter into executive session to discuss personnel matters.
So
Real
moved.
estate, yeah. Well, let me finish. I like.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, real estate and or potential litigation in accordance with OCGA 50-14 -3/2012.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, so guys, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're going into executive session.